A little while ago, I posted a poll for what grade would you give Andrew Jackson's presidency? And here are the results. With 4% of you giving Jackson an A, 11% giving him a B, 33% giving Jackson a C, 21% giving him a D, and 30% of you giving President Jackson an F. Now, if we take those results and try to find a grade point average with an A equaling 4, a B equaling 3, C equaling a 2, D is a 1, and an F is a 0, then we get a grade point average of 1.37, which my guess is would be in the low end compared to the other presidents. We had one comment which was from Ella Wu, who said, quote, I thought the mass removal of the indigenous people would guarantee an F. I don't disagree with Ella, and I'm not too surprised by the results of the poll, given how some of the most notable aspects and effects of Jackson's presidency, especially those that are covered in high school history classes, were the Trail of Tears, using the veto to hinder Clay's American System Plan, the nullification crisis, his war with the national bank, and how President Jackson is characterized as a person with a short temper and many enemies. However, I do find how the perception of Jackson has changed over time interesting. He has gone from a revered former president to one that, while still has his backers today, is criticized and even scorned by many that have some knowledge of his presidency. In doing some prep for this video, I read one of the most popular biographies of Jackson's presidency, American Lion, Andrew Jackson in the White House, by John Meacham, and an article from Gilder Lehrman Institute about the shifting legacy of Jackson. Links to both are below. The Lehrman essay says, quote, 13 polls of historians and political scientists taken between 1948 and 2009 have ranked Jackson always in or near the top 10 presidents among the great or near great. Now, there are a variety of ways to define great, and not all of them can lead to positive aspects of a person or their career as a leader. In Jackson's case, there are many different issues, and it really depends on what a person who is analyzing him focuses on. The defenders and admirers of Jackson, and there are many, including presidents that would score near the top of a poll like this, including Abraham Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, and Harry Truman, they all point to how Jackson saw himself and the presidency as the defender of the American people. Teddy Roosevelt says, quote, Jackson had many faults, but he was devotedly attached to the Union, and he had no thought of fear when it came to defending his country. With the exception of Washington and Lincoln, no man has left a deeper mark on American history. There are also arguments in his favor for how Jackson handled the nullification crisis with South Carolina, which, after reading the Meacham book and gaining a much deeper understanding of that crisis, I have to give Jackson props for how he handled that situation. Jackson is also the first person to have a very improbable rise to the presidency. Quoting again from the Lehrman essay, America then was democracy embodied, and Andrew Jackson was its exemplar. Born poor, half-educated, self-risen, he was the first president from outside the colonial gentry. His critics, though, are numerous, both in his time period and throughout history. During his time period, Congressman Henry Clay verbally attacked Jackson constantly over his presidency, likening him to a dictator and tyrant, mostly over the use of the veto. Calhoun, Jackson's vice president during his first term, and who also led the charge against Jackson as a senator in Jackson's second term, also had similar attacks against Jackson. However, it was much more to do with the enforcement of the tariff and Jackson thwarting South Carolina's attempt to nullify it. There were those within Jackson's time that criticized his Indian removal policy. Of course, there were also many who opposed his hostile stance on the national bank. However, there was one criticism during his time period that I found ridiculous, and that was Jackson's support of his first Secretary of War, John Eaton. The issue that John Eaton had nothing to do with policy, but was about the Secretary of War's wife and possibility that she cheated on her previous husband. It was a huge scandal in Jackson's first term that I find laughable now. His opponents were also vicious in their treatment of Jackson's wife in the newspapers during 1824 and 1828 elections, which was around the similar issue of infidelity to her first husband that was far in the past. Those two scandals soured Jackson on many in Washington. I also think his characterization as an uneducated country bumpkin with a short temper is also inaccurate. Jackson showed great political skill in many situations, was well-read, and wrote with sophistication. There are many criticisms, though, that are sufficiently harsh on Jackson. While he constantly championed himself as a man of the people and was fighting for the American people, Jackson only included white people. He was very pro-slavery and even hindered the ability of abolitionists to distribute anti-slavery pamphlets through the U.S. mail. On the national bank, there were real issues with some of its practices, including in support of pro-bank politicians with friendly loans, but his ultimate policy of destroying the bank and sending federal funds out to state banks was a major reason for the long economic recession immediately after his presidency. And then there is, of course, the policy of Indian removal that led to thousands of natives being forced from their reservations that they had signed treaties for, and many dying from mistreatment on their forced march west of the Mississippi, which goes down as one of the saddest and most despicable chapters in American history.